One of the ways you can automate deployment of resources in Azure is through what are known as ARM templates. So ARM stands for Azure Resource Manager. That's sort of the engine of Azure that manages not only deployment and creation of resources, but also access to resources in Azure. So an ARM template is a file, a text file that describes a set of resources that can either be created or also updated. So using a file like this that describes a resource deployment enables this idea of a scripted setup. This is often called infrastructure as code because the text file essentially is some instructions to Azure about how to create some infrastructure. So creating a file like this is great for duplicating an environment. If you have a set of resources you've created in one region, you need to duplicate those resources in a different region, then an ARM template can be a good approach to that. There are features in these files, parameters and variables you'll see in the example coming up. It helps you to customize the deployment so you can change things such as the VM name. If you're going to create a VM in a different region, you would want a different name for it. So you can use some features of ARM templates to assist with that. The Azure portal is one way you can generate templates. So the Azure portal will give you a template file for an existing set of resources. And it can be a really great way to get started with a template. Once you create an ARM template, you can save it to a library. So your Azure account has a library of templates that you can create, and then you can just manage those templates over time. They become a sort of code base. So there's your infrastructure as code again. There's even a community contributed set of templates called the Azure Quick Start templates. You can find those at the Azure site, or even more easily, just go and do a web search for Azure Quick Start templates. And there are hundreds of templates that you can use to get started with various kinds of environments. So let's watch an example of how to create one of these templates, ARM templates, from the Azure portal. An Azure Resource Manager template, or ARM template, can be generated in the portal. I'll show you how. We'll go to VM1, My VM, scroll down to Automation, and click on Export Template. So Azure generates this template, which could be used to recreate this VM. However, there might be other resources I want to include in the template. If they're all in the same resource group, this message here at the top gives us a clue the next step. Go back to the overview blade, click on the resource group name. I'll collapse the left and top sections, and then in the resource group itself, check off the resources that you want in the template, and click Export. Now this template contains all those resources. I could deploy from here, I could download the JSON file, I could add it to a library. If this were my dev VM, could save that to a library in Azure. To find this library, easiest to go up to resources and search for templates. So I can see here the template that I created, dev VM. I can edit the template from here, change its name or description. If I wanted to edit the resource information, I can come and make modifications here. Let's say I change the default VM name to be dev VM1. Click OK. I need to save this change. So the portal allows me to just keep a set of templates that I want to use. Further, if you find a template that's ready to use, you can deploy it from here. This deploys straight into the Azure portal. You could again edit on the fly here, change some of the parameters. If you like it the way it is, just fill out the information that you see on the screen and click purchase. All purchase means here is you realize that you're going to be creating resources that will cost you money. So the portal makes it easy to create, manage templates that you might want to use to redeploy resources in your Azure environment. To finish our discussion of templates, let's look at an example. This is a very simple template that represents a public IP address, which is a resource you can set up in Azure. So the format for this file, as was discussed in the example video, is a JSON file. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's just a nice, simple way to represent a set of keys and values. So what shows up in red are property names or keys. These are attributes of various parts of an IP address. And then the value occurs in blue and separated by a colon, name and value, and then separated by commas between different key value pairs. So the things to maybe remember about an ARM template exam-wise required sections. The schema section is required. It just represents the format of this particular file. In case it were to change over time, you need to know which format to use. Content version is also required. This is just a string that represents the version number of this file. Since you can store templates in a library, you may want to version them over time. Other required section is the resources section. It has to have at least one resource represented in it, which is what is the resource you want to create. And even if you're not a programmer, or even if you don't understand JSON really, or want to create one of these files from scratch, they're easily read by us, by humans, right? So you can look in the resources section quickly and see that the first resource type is the public IP address. And then it has a name, and it has a location, which represents an Azure region. It has a SKU, which is standard. And then it has various properties, like there's the actual IP address for this public IP address. So there are specific key names that you would have to include. Some would be required, some are optional. But if you use the Azure portal to build one of these template files for you, then you at least start with the file that works, and then you can modify it if needed. So besides the three required sections, the one other thing I would like to point out is parameters and variables. These are optional sections. Parameters allow you to pass information into the template file. And so the parameter listed here is called public IP address, ACME frontend IP name. You can see that it is used in the name, the value for the name property in resources. So if you were to go to the portal and deploy this resource, you would have the option to put in the name of the IP address that you wanted to use. So it allows you to pass data into the template as you deploy it. And this, of course, makes the template even more useful, because then things that need to change from resource to resource can change through the use of parameters. Variables, there are no variables in this file, but a variable you'll often see in template files as well is just a way to give a name to a value that you're going to use somewhere else, maybe multiple times in the template file. So get familiar with just looking at these, scanning them, get an idea of what they contain. You can quickly see the set of resources that are being created, and you'll be well on your way to understanding how ARM templates can be used to help you manage Azure deployments.